The wind howled through the rocky mountain pass, with such ferocity that Adam Xander could barely see his partner riding just 10 feet ahead of him. And it was this same wind that nearly carried away the sound he thought he heard somewhere between a moan and a whisper coming from behind a snowdrift near the narrow trail. He raised his gloved hand to signal Thomas to stop, pulling his horse to a halt, despite every instinct telling him to keep moving before the storm got worse. They had been checking fence lines for the Bar Cross Ranch outside St. Joe, Colorado, where both men had worked for the past 3 years, and this detour into the higher elevations had already cost them half a day. They could not afford to lose with winter pressing down hard in January of 1882. "You hear that?" Adam called out, his voice nearly lost in the wind. Thomas Crawford turned his horse around, snow coating his beard and hat brim. "Hear what? We need to get moving, Adam. This storm is getting worse by the minute." Adam dismounted anyway, his boots sinking deep into the fresh powder as he moved toward the sound that had caught his attention. Something dark against the white caught his eye, and his heart lurched when he realized it was fabric, and beneath that fabric was a person. He ran as fast as the snow would allow, dropping to his knees beside what he now could see was a woman, her lips blue, her skin pale as the snow surrounding her, her dark hair frozen in strands across her face. Her eyes fluttered open just slightly, and through chattering teeth, she whispered words that would echo in Adam's mind for years to come. "Please don't leave me here." "Thomas, get over here now," Adam shouted, already shrugging out of his heavy coat to wrap around the woman. She was dressed in clothes far too thin for mountain travel, a simple cotton dress and a torn shawl that offered no protection against the elements. "We have a woman here, half frozen. Help me get her on my horse." Thomas was beside him in seconds, his eyes wide with shock. "Where in blazes did she come from? There is nothing up here for miles." Questions later. "We need to get her warm or she will die." Adam lifted the woman carefully, alarmed at how light she felt, how her body trembled violently against his chest. Her whispered plea echoed again as he mounted his horse with Thomas's help, settling her in front of him so he could wrap both his coat and his arms around her. "There is that old trapper's cabin about 2 miles south. We will never make it back to the ranch in this storm." The ride to the cabin felt eternal, each minute marked by the woman's shallow breathing against Adam's chest and the fear that they might be too late. He found himself talking to her, telling her to hold on, promising that they would get her warm, though he had no idea if she could even hear him through her semi-conscious state. Thomas rode ahead, breaking trail through the deepening snow, glancing back frequently with worry etched across his weathered face. When they finally reached the cabin, a small structure nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided some shelter from the wind, Thomas kicked the door open and immediately began building a fire in the stone fireplace while Adam carried the woman inside. The cabin was basic, containing a single room with a rough-hewn bed frame, a table, 2 chairs, and little else, but it was shelter, and that was all that mattered. "Get that fire going hot," Adam said, laying the woman on the bed and grabbing every blanket he could find in the cabin. There were only 2, both smelling of mildew and age, but they would have to do. He began rubbing her hands and arms through the blankets, trying to get her blood moving, while Thomas worked on the fire with the desperation of a man who understood how close to death their unexpected charge had come. "We need to get her out of these wet clothes," Thomas said, once flames began licking up the chimney. "She will never warm up otherwise." Adam nodded, his face flushing despite the cold. "Turn around then. This is not right, but you are correct that it is necessary." With as much propriety as the situation allowed, Adam removed the woman's frozen dress and undergarments, averting his eyes as much as possible while wrapping her in the dry blankets. Her skin was like ice beneath his fingers, and he feared they had found her too late. He positioned her as close to the fire as he dared. Then Thomas handed him his own spare shirt from his saddlebag, and they managed to dress her in something dry without compromising her dignity. "I will get the horses settled in that lean-to around back," Thomas said quietly. "Keep working on warming her up. Talk to her, Adam. Sometimes that helps pull people back." After Thomas left, Adam pulled a chair close to the bed and continued rubbing the woman's hands, her arms, trying to bring warmth back into her frozen limbs. "You are safe now," he said softly, feeling foolish talking to someone who might not hear him. "My name is Adam Xander, and you are in a cabin in the mountains outside St. Joe, Colorado. You are going to be fine. We found you just in time." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Thomas returned and made coffee from their supplies, the bitter smell filling the small cabin and mixing with the wood smoke from the fire. They took turns keeping watch over the woman, feeding the fire, and trying to get her to sip warm water whenever her eyes fluttered open. Mostly she remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady, her body slowly losing that frightening coldness that had terrified Adam when he first touched her. It was near midnight when her eyes finally opened fully, confusion and fear flashing across her face as she looked around the unfamiliar cabin. Adam was alone with her, Thomas having fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, exhausted from their long day. "Easy," Adam said gently, moving closer but careful not to frighten her. "You are safe. We found you in the snow this afternoon. Do you remember anything?" She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes a striking shade of green even in the firelight before she whispered, "The wagon." "There was a wagon accident. I was traveling with a family, the Mitchells. We hit ice on the trail and went over. I tried to help them, but—" Her voice broke, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "They did not survive. I walked, trying to find help, but I got lost in the storm." "How long were you out there?" Adam asked, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. "I do not know. A day, maybe two. Everything became confused after a while. I just kept walking until I could not walk anymore." She looked down at herself, realizing she was wearing a man's shirt under the blankets, and color flooded her cheeks. "Did you?" "Only what was necessary to save your life," Adam said quickly, his own face warming. "Your clothes were frozen solid. I tried to be respectful." She nodded slowly, seeming to accept this. "Thank you. When I fell in the snow, I thought I was going to die there. When you found me, when I asked you not to leave me, I did not really believe anyone would stay. Thank you for proving me wrong." "What is your name?" Adam asked gently. "Catherine Brennan," she said, her voice gaining a bit more strength. "I was traveling from Missouri to meet my brother in Denver. He has a shop there, a general store. The Mitchells offered me passage with their family when they learned we were headed in the same direction." Her face crumpled again. They had 3 children, all so young. Adam reached out instinctively and took her hand, offering what comfort he could. "I am sorry for your loss. That is a terrible thing to survive." Thomas stirred in his chair, waking to find their patient conscious. "Well now, that is a sight better than you looked this afternoon, Miss. Thomas Crawford at your service." He stood and stretched. "I will ride out at first light, get word to St. Joe about the accident so they can send someone to recover the bodies properly." "You need proper medical attention too, Miss." "Catherine," she said softly. "Please call me Catherine. And I do not know how to thank you both. You saved my life." "Any decent man would have done the same," Thomas replied, though Adam noticed his partner glancing between him and Catherine with a knowing look that made him uncomfortable. "Now, you should rest. You have been through an ordeal that would have killed most people." The fact that you are alive and talking is something of a miracle." Catherine did rest, finally allowing herself to sleep deeply now that she was warm and safe. Adam found he could not sleep, however, keeping watch over her through the night even though Thomas had offered to take a turn. There was something about finding her in the snow, about that desperate whisper asking him not to leave, that had lodged itself deep in his chest in a way he could not quite explain. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving the world covered in pristine white that glittered in the early light. Thomas prepared to ride out, but before he left, he pulled Adam aside outside the cabin. "You are smitten," Thomas said bluntly, not bothering with subtlety. "I do not know what you mean," Adam replied, though he could feel heat creeping up his neck. "Sure you do not. Just be careful, Adam. She has been through hell. Last thing she needs is you mooning over her when she is trying to recover." "I am not mooning over anyone. I am simply concerned about someone we found nearly dead in the snow." Thomas laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Whatever you say, friend. I will be back by tomorrow evening with the doctor and supplies. Think you can manage here alone until then? I am perfectly capable of keeping a fire going and making sure she is comfortable." After Thomas rode off, Adam returned to the cabin to find Catherine awake again, sitting up carefully and looking much better than she had the night before, though still pale and weak. She had managed to wrap the blankets around herself like a makeshift dress, preserving her modesty. "Your friend left," she asked. "Gone to St. Joe to get help and notify the authorities about the accident. He will be back tomorrow evening." Adam moved to the fire and began preparing breakfast from their limited supplies, grateful they had packed extra in case they got caught in the mountains. "Are you hungry? I am not much of a cook, but I can manage coffee and beans and biscuits." "That sounds wonderful," Catherine said, and Adam could hear the genuine hunger in her voice. She had likely not eaten in days. They ate in companionable silence, Catherine devouring her portion with the desperation of someone who had been starving, though she tried to maintain some semblance of manners. Adam found himself watching her when he thought she was not looking, noticing details he had missed in the crisis of the previous day. The way her dark hair fell past her shoulders in waves, still slightly tangled from her ordeal. The delicate line of her jaw. The intelligence in her eyes as she looked around the cabin, clearly trying to piece together her situation. "How far are we from St. Joe?" she asked finally. "About 15 miles, but the trail is rough and the snow will make it slower. This cabin belongs to an old trapper who lets the ranch hands use it when we are working in the high country. It is not much, but it is shelter." "It is perfect," Catherine said firmly. "It is warm and dry and I am alive. That makes it the most beautiful place I have ever seen." They spent the day in that small cabin, talking in the way that people do when circumstances have forced an unexpected intimacy. Catherine told him about growing up in Missouri, about losing her parents to cholera 3 years ago, about her brother Marcus, who had headed west to make his fortune, and had finally saved enough to send for her. She spoke of her dreams of starting fresh in Denver, of perhaps opening a dress shop of her own someday, of building a new life in Colorado. Adam shared his own story in turn, about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about losing that farm to debt and drought, about drifting west until he found work at the Bar Cross Ranch. He told her about the simplicity of cowboy life, about long days in the saddle checking cattle and mending fences, about nights under the stars that made him feel both insignificant and part of something vast and eternal. "You like it?" Catherine asked. "The cowboy life?" Adam considered this. "It is honest work and I like working with my hands, being outside. The pay is not great, but it is steady. I have been saving money, thinking maybe someday I could buy a small piece of land of my own, run a few head of cattle. Nothing grand, but mine." "That sounds like a good dream," Catherine said softly. "Everyone should have land of their own if they want it, something permanent in a world that can change so quickly." As evening fell, the reality of their situation became apparent. There was only one bed, and while Catherine was stronger than she had been, she was still recovering from her ordeal. Adam made a show of arranging blankets near the fire for himself, but Catherine stopped him. "You have been taking care of me all night and day," she said. "You need proper rest. The bed is large enough that we can both sleep there without impropriety. We can arrange blankets between us." "That would not be proper," Adam protested, though exhaustion was pulling at him. "Nothing about this situation is proper," Catherine replied with a hint of humor in her voice. "We are two strangers alone in a cabin in the mountains, and I am wearing your partner's shirt as a dress. I think propriety left when you saved my life. Please, Adam, you have been nothing but kind and respectful. I trust you." Those last words hit Adam harder than he expected. Trust. She trusted him, this woman who had every reason to be frightened and wary. He finally nodded, and they arranged the sleeping situation as modestly as possible, with extra blankets creating a barrier between them. Lying there in the darkness, listening to the fire crackle and Catherine's steady breathing beside him, Adam found himself thinking about how strange life could be. Yesterday morning, he had been just another cowboy doing his job, thinking about nothing more significant than fence lines and cattle. Now he was lying next to the most fascinating woman he had ever met, a woman he had pulled from the snow, a woman whose desperate plea had touched something deep inside him. "Adam," Catherine's voice came softly through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes, thank you again. For not leaving me. For staying. I know I already said it, but I need you to know how much it means. You do not need to keep thanking me, Catherine, but I do. You gave me my life back. That is not nothing." Adam wanted to say something profound, something that would capture the strange feelings swirling inside him, but all he could manage was, "I am glad we found you." The next day passed in much the same way as the first, conversation flowing easily between them, interrupted by long, comfortable silences. Catherine grew stronger by the hour, and by afternoon she was able to stand and move around the cabin, though Adam cautioned her not to push herself too hard. He went out to check the horses and gather more firewood, and when he returned, he found Catherine had attempted to tidy the cabin as much as possible, and had even washed out their breakfast dishes in snow she had melted over the fire. "You should be resting," he said, though he could not keep the smile from his face. "I have been resting. I needed to move to feel useful. You have been doing everything." They were standing close together in the small cabin, and Adam became suddenly aware of her proximity, of the way the firelight caught in her dark hair, of how her green eyes seemed to see right through him. He stepped back quickly, uncomfortable with the intensity of his own reaction. "Thomas should be back soon," he said, needing to break the moment. "The doctor will want to check you over, make sure you have no frostbite or lasting damage." "I feel fine," Catherine said, but there was something in her voice that made Adam look at her more closely. "What is wrong?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "I have been thinking about what happens next. My brother is expecting me in Denver, but I have no money, no way to get there now. Everything I had was in the wagon. I do not even have proper clothes." "We will figure something out," Adam said firmly. "Thomas knows everyone in St. Joe. We will get you sorted out, get you to Denver." "Why are you being so kind to me?" Catherine asked suddenly, her eyes searching his face. "You do not know me. I am nothing to you, yet you have done all this." Adam struggled for words, trying to understand his own motivations. "When I heard you in the snow, when I saw you lying there, something just clicked inside me. The idea of leaving you, of anyone leaving you there to die, was impossible. And then when you asked me not to leave you, it felt like a promise, like I was making a vow even though we had just met. Does that sound foolish? No, Catherine said softly, moving closer to him. It sounds like exactly what I needed to hear. Adam, I feel something here too. I know it is too soon. I know we have only known each other for 2 days under the strangest circumstances, but I feel like I can talk to you in ways I have not talked to anyone in years. Like you see me, really see me, not just a woman who needs rescuing but a person. Adam reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I do see you, Catherine. I see someone strong and brave, someone who survived something that would have killed most people. I see someone who makes me want to be better than I am. They were interrupted by the sound of horses outside. Multiple horses, and reluctantly pulled apart as the door opened to reveal Thomas along with Dr. Harrison from St. Joe and Sheriff Miller. Catherine stepped back, suddenly self-conscious about her makeshift clothing, and Adam moved protectively closer to her. Miss Brennan, I presume, Sheriff Miller said, removing his hat. Thomas here told us what happened. Terrible tragedy about the Mitchell family. I have men up at the accident site now recovering the bodies. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Catherine recounted the story again, her voice steady despite the pain Adam could see in her eyes. The wagon had hit a patch of ice on a narrow part of the trail, skidded, and gone over the edge. She had been thrown clear and had tried desperately to help the family, but the wagon had rolled, and by the time she reached them, it was too late. She had gathered what supplies she could carry and started walking, thinking she could find help, but the storm had come up, and she had gotten disoriented. Dr. Harrison examined her while she spoke, checking her extremities for frostbite, listening to her breathing, asking questions about pain and sensation. You are remarkably lucky, young lady, he said finally. No permanent damage that I can see, though you will need to rest for another week at least. Your body has been through a tremendous shock. I will arrange for a room at the boarding house in St. Joe, Sheriff Miller said. We will also send a telegram to your brother in Denver. Let him know what happened and that you are safe. I do not have money for a room, Catherine said quietly, shame coloring her cheeks. The town will cover it, the sheriff said kindly. We take care of our own here, and anyone who survives what you survived has earned a little help. Besides, Thomas tells me you were on your way to Denver to join family. We will make sure you get there safely when you are ready. They made the journey back to St. Joe the next morning, Catherine riding double with Adam since she still did not have the strength for a long ride on her own. She sat in front of him on his horse, and he kept his arms around her, ostensibly to keep her steady, though both of them knew it was more than that. Thomas rode ahead with the doctor and sheriff, giving them space, and Adam was grateful for his friend's discretion. St. Joe was a small town nestled in the valley, consisting of one main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a boarding house, a blacksmith, and various other businesses that served the ranches and mines in the surrounding area. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and by the time they rode in, half the town had already heard about the mysterious woman the Cowboys had found half frozen in the mountains. Mrs. Dorothy Sanders, who ran the boarding house, took one look at Catherine and immediately swept into action, ushering her into a room and promising to bring up hot water for a bath and proper clothing. You poor dear, she kept saying, tusking over Catherine's condition. We will have you fixed up in no time. Do not you worry about a thing. Adam found himself reluctant to leave, standing awkwardly in the boarding house hallway until Thomas physically pulled him away. Let the women handle it now, Thomas said with a grin. You have done your part. She is safe and in good hands. I know that. Then why do you look like a lost puppy? Adam scowled at his friend. I do not look like anything. I am simply concerned about her welfare. Uh-huh. Adam, I have known you for 3 years. I have never seen you look at any woman the way you look at her. It is fine to admit you are sweet on her. It is not like that. Or maybe it is. I do not know, Thomas. I feel like I have been hit by a train. 2 days ago I did not know she existed, and now I cannot imagine not knowing her. How does that make any sense? Thomas clapped him on the shoulder sympathetically. Love does not make sense, friend. It just is. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? She is going to Denver to be with her brother. She has a life waiting for her there. I am just a cowboy who found her in the snow. You saved her life. That means something. That means she feels grateful, not that she feels anything else. You are an idiot, Thomas said affectionately, but you will figure it out. Adam and Thomas returned to the Bar Cross Ranch that afternoon, and Adam found himself going through the motions of his work in a daze. His boss, Frank Morrison, was understanding about the time they had lost, especially when he heard the full story, but there was still work to be done. Cattle did not feed themselves, and fences did not mend themselves. Yet, Adam found his mind wandering constantly back to St. Joe, to the boarding house, wondering how Catherine was doing, whether she was resting, whether she was thinking about him at all, or if he was just the cowboy who had happened to find her. Nothing more. 3 days passed before he could justify riding into town again, using the excuse of picking up supplies for the ranch. He told himself he was not hoping to see Catherine, that he was simply doing his job, but his heart was pounding as he tied his horse outside the general store. Adam Xander, as I live and breathe, came a familiar voice, and he turned to see Catherine standing on the boardwalk, looking completely transformed from the half-frozen woman he had found in the snow. She wore a simple but lovely blue dress that Mrs. Sanders must have provided. Her dark hair was neatly arranged and color had returned to her cheeks. She looked healthy and strong and absolutely beautiful. Catherine, he managed, feeling suddenly tongue-tied. You look well. I feel well. Dr. Harrison says I am recovering remarkably. I have been staying at the boarding house, helping Mrs. Sanders with cooking and cleaning to earn my keep. She insisted I did not need to, but I could not just sit idle. They stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing what to say, until Catherine said, Would you walk with me? I have been wanting to thank you properly, without doctors and sheriffs around. They walked to the edge of town, where a small creek ran through a grove of cottonwood trees, their branches bare in the winter cold. It was a beautiful spot despite the season, peaceful and private. I received a telegram from my brother, Catherine said as they walked. He is making arrangements for me to take the stage to Denver next week. He is relieved I am safe but devastated about the Mitchell family. He knew them slightly from trading circles. Next week, Adam repeated, the words feeling like stones in his stomach. That is good. You will finally get to start your new life. Yes, Catherine said, but she did not sound happy about it. Adam, I need to tell you something. These past few days, recovering in St. Joe, I have had time to think. About what happened, about how close I came to dying, about priorities and chances and things left unsaid. Catherine, please let me finish. When I was in that snow, when I thought I was going to die, my biggest regret was that I had been so careful my whole life, so proper, so worried about what people thought. And I realized I had never really lived, never taken chances, never told people how I truly felt. I promised myself that if I survived, I would not make that mistake again. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. Adam, I know we have only known each other a short time. I know the circumstances of our meeting were unusual, but I feel something for you that I have never felt before. When I am with you, I feel safe and seen and valued in a way I never did even with men I had known for years. You make me want to be brave." Adam's heart was racing. "I feel the same way. Catherine, you have been all I can think about. I have been trying to convince myself it was just the circumstances, just the drama of the situation, but it is more than that. I know it is. But you have a new life waiting in Denver, your brother, your dreams of opening a shop." "Dreams can change," Catherine said softly. "People can change." "Adam, I am not asking you for promises or commitments we are not ready for. I just wanted you to know how I feel before I leave. I wanted you to know that when you pulled me from that snow, you did not just save my life. You woke something up inside me that I did not even know was sleeping." Adam pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and they stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the winter afternoon. "I do not want you to go," he admitted finally, "but I do not have the right to ask you to stay. What can I offer you? I am a cowboy. I live in a bunkhouse with 5 other men. I have barely any money saved. You deserve better than that." Catherine pulled back to look at him, her green eyes fierce. "You do not get to decide what I deserve. That is my choice. And maybe I do not need a mansion or a fortune. Maybe I need someone who sees me, who values me, who makes me feel alive." "Then stay," Adam said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Stay in St. Joe. Give us a chance to see what this could be. I know it is a risk. I know I am asking you to give up your plans. But Catherine, I think we could have something real here, something worth fighting for." "What about my brother? He is expecting me." "Send him a telegram. Explain the situation. If he loves you, he will understand. And if things do not work out, if you decide you made a mistake, I will personally escort you to Denver myself. But please, do not leave before we have a chance to find out what this could become." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, and Adam could see her thinking, weighing, considering. Finally she said, "I need to think about this. It is a big decision. Can you give me time?" "All the time you need," Adam said, though his heart was sinking. The next few days were agony. Adam tried to focus on work, but his mind kept wandering to St. Joe, to Catherine, wondering what she was thinking, what she would decide. Thomas tried to distract him with jokes and conversation, but it was no use. "You have got it bad," Thomas observed one evening as they sat by the fire in the bunkhouse. "Never seen you like this over a woman before." "I have never felt like this about a woman before," Adam admitted. "Is that pathetic, falling for someone I barely know?" "Nah, sometimes you just know. My parents knew each other 3 weeks before they got married, and they were together 40 years before Pa died. When it is right, it is right. No sense fighting it." On Sunday, Adam rode into St. Joe for church services, something he did not always attend but felt compelled to now. He spotted Catherine sitting with Mrs. Sanders, and his heart leaped when she smiled at him. After the service, she approached him directly. "Walk with me again?" she asked. They returned to their spot by the creek, and Catherine took a deep breath. "I sent a telegram to my brother yesterday. I told him everything. About the accident, about you, about my confusion over what to do next." Adam waited, barely breathing. "He wrote back this morning. He said that life is too short and too uncertain to play it safe. He said our parents would have wanted me to follow my heart, not just their plans. He said Denver will still be there if I ever want to come, but I should not come out of obligation." She looked up at Adam, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "So I am staying. I am staying in St. Joe, and I am taking a chance on whatever this is between us." Adam swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing with joy and relief. When he set her down, they were standing so close he could see gold flecks in her green eyes, could feel her breath on his face. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "I was hoping you would," she replied, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. The next months passed in a blur of happiness. Catherine continued staying at the boarding house, working for Mrs. Sanders in exchange for room and board, but she and Adam spent every free moment together. He courted her properly, with walks and picnics and church socials, with flowers picked from the meadows and small gifts carved from wood during long evenings. The town embraced their romance, delighted by the dramatic story of how they met, and Mrs. Sanders took particular pleasure in chaperoning their time together and offering Catherine romantic advice. In April, when the snow finally melted and wildflowers began blooming in the mountain meadows, Adam took Catherine back to the spot where he had found her. It was a pilgrimage of sorts, a need to return to the place where their story had begun. "I barely remember it," Catherine admitted as they stood on the trail. "Everything was so confused, so cold. I remember the fear more than the place." "You asked me not to leave you," Adam said. "Right here in this spot. Do you remember that?" Vaguely. "It felt like a dream. It was real. And Catherine, I want you to know that I never will. Leave you, I mean. I know we have only been courting a few months and maybe it is too soon for this, but I do not want to wait. Life is uncertain, as you well know. We have been given something precious, and I do not want to waste time being careful or proper." He dropped to one knee right there on the trail, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. He had spent most of his savings on it, but it still seemed inadequate for what he wanted to express. "Catherine Brennan, you are the strongest, bravest, most fascinating woman I have ever known. You make me want to be better, to build something lasting, to create a life worth living. Would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife?" Tears streamed down Catherine's face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Adam, I love you. I have loved you since those days in the cabin when you took care of me, when you saw me not as a victim but as a person. Yes, I will marry you." The ring slipped onto her finger perfectly, and they kissed there on the mountain trail, in the place where death had nearly claimed her, where instead she had found life and love, and a future she had never imagined possible. They were married in June in the small church in St. Joe, with Thomas as Adam's best man and Mrs. Sanders standing up with Catherine. The whole town turned out for the celebration, bringing food and gifts and well wishes. Even Marcus made the trip from Denver, embracing his sister with tears in his eyes and shaking Adam's hand with genuine warmth. "You take care of her," Marcus said seriously. "She is all the family I have left." "She is my family now too," Adam replied. "And I will spend every day of my life making sure she knows how loved she is." Frank Morrison had given them a wedding present that stunned them both. A small parcel of land on the edge of the Bar Cross Ranch property, and enough lumber to start building a house. "You are the best hand I have got," Frank had said gruffly. "Figure if I help you get settled, you will stick around. Plus I like your lady. She has grit." Adam and Catherine spent their first year of marriage living in a small cabin. Adam built with help from Thomas and the other ranch hands, gradually improving it with glass windows, a real floor, and a sturdy roof. Catherine proved to be remarkably adept at frontier life, learning to cook over a wood stove, to preserve food for winter, to help with calving season, and to handle the isolation that came with ranch living. But it never felt isolated to them. They had each other, and that was enough. Adam continued working for the Bar Cross Ranch, but also began building his own small herd with calves Frank let him purchase at cost. Catherine kept a garden and chickens, sold eggs and vegetables in town, and began taking in sewing work. her skill with a needle impressing the women of St. Joe. Their first child arrived in March of 1884, a healthy boy they named Andrew Marcus Xander, combining a family name Adam had loved with Catherine's brother's name. The birth was difficult, attended by Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Sanders, and there were hours when Adam paced outside the cabin in terror, remembering how close he had come to losing Catherine before, fearing he might lose her again. But Catherine proved once more how strong she was, and when Adam finally was allowed into the bedroom to meet his son, he found her exhausted but radiant, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite tenderness. "He is perfect," Catherine whispered. "Adam, we made something perfect." Adam kissed her forehead, then carefully touched his son's tiny hand, marveling when small fingers wrapped around his own. "You are perfect. Thank you for this, for him, for everything." Life settled into a rhythm of work and family and simple joys. Their herd grew slowly but steadily. Catherine's sewing business expanded until she was one of the most sought-after seamstresses in the county. They added rooms to the cabin as their means allowed. Thomas married a widow from town named Sarah and built his own place nearby, and the two families became close, their children growing up together. Andrew was walking and talking when Catherine discovered she was expecting again. This time she was less frightened, more confident in her body's ability to bring new life into the world. Their daughter arrived in August of 1886, during a summer thunderstorm that seemed to mirror the drama of her entrance. They named her Clara Rose Xander, and she proved to have her mother's determination from the very start. Sometimes, on quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Adam and Catherine would sit on the porch of their cabin and watch the sun set over the mountains. Adam always thought back to that day in the snow, to how differently everything could have turned out, to how many tiny choices and moments of chance had led them to this life. "You ever regret it?" he asked one evening when Clara was about 6 months old. "Staying here instead of going to Denver? Wonder about the life you might have had." Catherine was quiet for a moment, rocking gently in the chair he had built for her. "Sometimes I wonder," she admitted, "but wondering is not the same as regretting. I wonder what that life would have been like, but I do not want it. This life, right here with you and our babies, working together to build something of our own, this is better than anything I ever dreamed of in Missouri. You gave me more than my life back that day in the snow, Adam. You gave me a reason to live it fully." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Andrew grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the cattle and could sit quietly watching the animals for hours. Clara was her mother's daughter, quick-witted and independent, always asking questions and never content to be told something was just the way it was. In 1889, Catherine's brother Marcus decided to sell his store in Denver and move to St. Joe, wanting to be closer to his sister and her family. He opened a new general store in town and quickly became a pillar of the community. His presence meant the world to Catherine, giving her both family connections and someone who remembered her parents, who could share stories of their childhood together. Adam and Catherine welcomed a third child in 1890, another boy they named Daniel Thomas Xander, honoring the friend who had been there from the beginning. Thomas was deeply moved, and he and Sarah became Daniel's godparents, promising to look after him if anything ever happened to his parents. The Bar Cross Ranch continued to thrive, and Frank Morrison eventually offered Adam a partnership in the operation, recognizing his skill and dedication. With Catherine's sewing income and the ranch partnership, the Xanders found themselves comfortably middle class, able to afford small luxuries and, most importantly, to ensure their children would have opportunities they had not had. In 1892, they made the decision to add a real addition to their cabin, transforming it into a proper house with separate bedrooms for the children, a spacious kitchen for Catherine, and a sitting room where they could entertain guests. The work took most of the summer, with friends and neighbors helping in the way frontier communities did, everyone pitching in because they knew someday they might need similar help. The night they first slept in the completed house, Adam pulled Catherine close in their new bedroom, still marveling at the privacy of having a door that closed, walls that did not leak, windows that actually fit their frames. "We did it," he said softly, mindful of the children sleeping down the hall. "We built a real home." "We did," Catherine agreed, snuggling into his embrace. "When I think about where we started, about that girl half frozen in the snow who thought she was going to die, I can barely believe this is real, that you are real, that our children are sleeping down the hall in their own beds in our house on our land. It is real. You are real. This is our life, and we built it together. I love you, Adam Xander. I have loved you since those days in that trapper's cabin, even though I was too scared and confused to recognize it then. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me too," Adam replied, kissing her deeply. "Finding you in that snow, hearing you ask me not to leave you, it changed the entire course of my life. I will never regret stopping, never regret listening to that voice telling me something was wrong. Some people might call it luck or chance, but I think it was meant to be." As their children grew, Adam and Catherine made sure to tell them the story of how they met, wanting them to understand how precious and unlikely their family was. The children never tired of hearing about the blizzard, the rescue, the cabin, the romance that had blossomed from such unlikely circumstances. "Will you show us where you found Mama?" Andrew asked one summer when he was 12, old enough to make the ride into the mountains. Adam and Catherine exchanged glances, then nodded. They made it a family expedition, packing supplies and camping gear, turning it into an adventure. When they reached the spot on the trail, now clearly marked and well-traveled in good weather, they all stood together as Adam and Catherine recounted the story once more. "Mama almost died right here," Clara asked, her voice awed and frightened. "She almost did," Adam confirmed. "But she was strong, and she fought to survive. And I happened to be riding past at exactly the right moment to hear her. If I had been 5 minutes later, if the wind had been blowing differently, if I had not been paying attention, everything would be different." "You would not exist," Catherine added, pulling her daughter close. "None of you would. Your father and I would not have met, would not have fallen in love, would not have built our life together. So yes, this spot represents something terrible that happened, but it also represents the beginning of everything good that came after." They camped there that night, and Adam told the children about the trapper's cabin where they had stayed, about how nervous he had been taking care of their mother, about how he had known even then that she was special. Catherine told them about waking up and being confused and frightened, but how Adam's steady presence had made her feel safe. "I think the most important thing you can learn from this story," Catherine said as they sat around the campfire, "is that life can change in an instant. Something terrible can transform into something wonderful. People who seem like strangers can become your whole world. You have to be open to possibilities, even when you are scared, especially when you are scared." As the children grew into teenagers and young adults, the Xander home became known as a place of warmth and welcome. Catherine's reputation as a seamstress had expanded into something more, and she now taught other women in the area her skills, helping them earn income for their families. Adam had become Frank Morrison's full partner in the Bar Cross Ranch and was training Andrew to eventually take over the operation. Clara proved to have her mother's gift with a needle but her father's love of the outdoors, and she shocked the conservative elements of St. Joe by declaring she wanted to be a veterinarian. It was an unconventional dream for a young woman in the 1890s, but her parents supported her wholeheartedly, having built their own lives on taking chances and defying expectations. Daniel, the youngest, showed an aptitude for numbers and business that impressed everyone, including his uncle Marcus, who began teaching him the intricacies of running a general store with an eye toward eventually expanding into a chain of stores across Colorado. In 1898, Marcus married a widow named Elizabeth who had moved to St. Joe with her teenage daughter, and the family grew even larger. The Xander and the extended family gathered every Sunday for dinner, a tradition Catherine had insisted on from the time the children were small, believing that family was the foundation of everything else. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1899, Adam surprised Catherine with a trip back to Missouri, wanting her to see the places of her childhood again, to visit her parents' graves, to reconnect with any remaining friends or distant relatives. It was an emotional journey, bittersweet in the way such returns always are, and Catherine found herself grateful for the life she had built in Colorado while also honoring the past that had shaped her. "I am glad we came," she told Adam as they stood at her parents' graveside. "I needed to tell them about my life, about you, about the children. I needed them to know I am happy, that I am loved, that I did not just survive but thrived. They would be proud of you," Adam said, squeezing her hand. "Of the woman you have become, of the family you have built, of the strength you have shown through everything." They returned to St. Joe renewed and recommitted, ready for whatever the new century would bring. The children continued to grow and pursue their dreams. Andrew married a rancher's daughter named Margaret in 1902 and began building his own house on Xander land, preparing to start his own family. Clara left for veterinary school in 1903, one of only a handful of women in her program, determined to prove she belonged. Daniel apprenticed with his uncle Marcus and showed every sign of becoming a successful businessman. Adam and Catherine, now in their 40s, found themselves entering a new phase of life. The house felt empty with the children gone or nearly grown, but they discovered they quite enjoyed the quiet, the ability to focus on each other again in ways that had been impossible when the children were small. "We should travel," Catherine suggested one evening. "Now that we have the means and the time. I want to see California, maybe even the Pacific Ocean. I want to visit Clara at school. I want to show you Missouri properly. We have spent so much time working and building, maybe now we can enjoy some of what we built." They did travel over the next few years, taking trips to Denver and San Francisco, and even back to Kansas to see what remained of Adam's childhood home. But they always returned to St. Joe, to their house and their land and their life, because that was where their hearts belonged. Andrew and Margaret made them grandparents in 1904 with the birth of a baby girl they named Catherine, and holding his granddaughter, seeing his wife's name carried on to a new generation. Adam felt the circle of his life completing itself in the most beautiful way. "She looks just like you," he told Catherine, who was cooing over the baby with tears streaming down her face. "She looks like hope," Catherine replied, "like the future, like everything we have built continuing on after we are gone." More grandchildren followed as the years passed. Clara graduated from veterinary school and returned to St. Joe, opening a practice that served ranchers and farmers throughout the county, eventually marrying a fellow veterinarian named Robert in 1907. Daniel married a shopkeeper's daughter named Alice in 1908, and they moved to Denver to open the first satellite location of what would eventually become a successful chain of general stores across Colorado. By 1910, Adam and Catherine were in their early 50s, grandparents 5 times over, respected elders in a community they had helped build. The Bar Cross Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. Catherine's sewing circle had evolved into a women's cooperative that helped widows and struggling families. Their children were thriving. Their grandchildren were healthy and happy. Life was good. On a warm evening in June, on their 26th wedding anniversary, Adam took Catherine back to the spot where he had proposed, the place where he had found her half-frozen all those years ago. It had become something of a tradition for them, returning to that spot on significant occasions, remembering where they had started and marveling at where they had ended up. 26 years, Catherine said, leaning against Adam as they looked out over the mountains. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime. It has been a lifetime, Adam said. A good lifetime, the best lifetime I could have imagined. You remember what you said to me when you found me, besides asking if I was all right. Adam thought back, trying to recall through the panic and fear of that day. I told you I would not leave you, that we would get you warm and safe. You kept that promise, Catherine said softly. Every day since then you have kept that promise. You never left me, Adam. Not in the mountains, not in the cabin, not in the hard times or the good times. You have been my constant, my anchor, my partner in everything. You made it easy, Adam replied, pulling her closer. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You are my best friend, my lover, my partner, the mother of my children, my favorite person in the world. I would find you in that snow 1,000 times over if it meant getting to live this life with you. They stood there as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink and purple. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The wind that had nearly killed Catherine all those years ago now blew gently through the pines, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the promise of summer. I love you, Adam Xander, Catherine said, her voice full of all the emotion of their shared history. I love you too, Catherine Xander, Adam replied. From that first moment I heard your voice in the snow until my last breath. You have been and will always be the love of my life. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren as the new century unfolded. Adam and Catherine grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing but their love remaining as strong as ever. They never took for granted the miracle of their meeting, the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. In the summer of 1920, when Adam was 61 and Catherine was 58, they celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. A family tree that had grown from that single moment in the snow when Adam had heard a desperate plea and chosen to stop, to search, to help. Tell us the story again, great-grandma, one of the youngest great-grandchildren begged, and Catherine smiled, pulling the child onto her lap. Well, she began, her voice still strong despite her years. It was the coldest winter day you can imagine, and I was lost in the mountains with snow falling all around me. I thought I was going to die there, alone and frozen. But then I heard something, the sound of horses, and I called out with the last of my strength. And do you know what happened? Great-grandpa found you, the child exclaimed. That is right. Your great-grandpa heard me and he stopped, even though it was dangerous, even though the storm was getting worse. And when he found me, when I asked him not to leave me there, he promised he never would. And he kept that promise. Every single day since then, he has kept that promise. She looked across the room to where Adam sat in his favorite chair, surrounded by grandchildren asking him about the ranch and cattle and the old days. He caught her eye and smiled, that same smile that had made her heart flutter in the trapper's cabin all those years ago. And she felt the same surge of love and gratitude she had felt then. This was the life they had built together, born from tragedy and chance and a simple act of kindness on a frozen mountain trail. This was the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the legacy they would leave behind. And it all started with a desperate plea and a promise made by a cowboy who chose not to ride past, who chose to listen, who chose to stop and help a stranger in need. As the celebration continued around them, children laughing and playing, adults talking and reminiscing, Catherine thought about all the small moments that had led to this big, beautiful life. The moment Adam had heard her in the snow, the moment she had decided to stay in St. Joe, the moment she had said yes to his proposal, the moment each of their children had been born, all the tiny decisions and chances and risks that had woven together into this tapestry of family and love and belonging. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Adam and Catherine sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they had used for decades, holding hands in the darkness. "It was a good party," Adam said contentedly. "It was a good life," Catherine replied. "Is a good life." "Adam, if I could go back to that girl in the snow, knowing everything that would come after, all the joy and the pain and the work and the love, I would choose it all again in a heartbeat. I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Adam said, lifting her hand to kiss it gently. "From the moment I heard your voice in that storm, my life became about you, about us, and I have never regretted a single moment." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their ranch, of the life they had built, surrounded by the mountains where their story had begun. And when they finally went inside, still holding hands after all these years, it was with the deep satisfaction of two people who had found in each other everything they had ever needed. The story that had begun with a desperate whisper in the snow had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the beauty of a promise kept. Adam had not left Catherine in the snow that day, and he never left her in all the days that followed. Together, they had built something remarkable, not just a family but a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. And if you had asked either of them about the secret to their happiness, they would have said the same thing, that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the worst circumstances, that love can bloom even in the coldest winters, and that a promise made in desperation can become the foundation of an entire life. Their story was one of survival and resilience, of chance and choice, of a cowboy who stopped when he could have ridden on, and a woman who found the strength to hope when hope seemed impossible. It was a Wild West romance in the truest sense, raw and real and rooted in the harsh beauty of the Colorado mountains. And it all began with 5 simple words whispered through frozen lips on a snowy mountain trail. "Please don't leave me here." Adam had not left her there. He had stayed, and in staying, he had found everything he never knew he needed. And Catherine, pulled from the edge of death, had discovered that sometimes the end of one journey is just the beginning of another, better one. Their love story, born in ice and snow, had warmed 2 lives and created countless more, a legacy that would endure for generations, all because a cowboy chose kindness over convenience, compassion over caution, and love over fear. In the end, that was all any love story really was. A choice made and kept day after day, year after year, through all the seasons of life. Adam and Catherine Xander had chosen each other on a frozen mountain in 1882, and they kept choosing each other every day until their last, building a life of extraordinary beauty from the most ordinary of materials: hard work, deep commitment, and a love that never wavered. And when their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren told the story in years to come, they always ended it the same way, with two old people sitting on a porch, holding hands, looking out at the mountains where their love had begun, perfectly content with the life they had built together. A life that proved that sometimes the most desperate moments can lead to the greatest joys, and that true love, once found, can weather any storm.